our little intros earlier. Andrew, do you want to give a little intro for yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew. I have the YouTube channel Andrewism. I'm a writer, artist, and YouTuber apparently. From Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad to be specific. And yeah, I'm an anarchist who really appreciates the breadth and depth of the whole philosophy and all the other stuff that comes with it.
We're super excited to have you on. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of your episodes with It Could Happen Here and Behind the Bastards and all of those folks. And yeah, I mean, we are very much the into nuance kind of anarchists.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think we'll have ample opportunity to look at some nuances with Batman. Yeah. Were you able to see it before hopping on today?
Yes. I watched it a couple of weeks ago, and I've wanted to rewatch it when it eventually comes out on Pirate Bay or whatever. But until then,
Yeah, I guess we should do a little summary and just kind of let everyone know. So, spoiler warnings for everyone watching. Yeah, this was a weird fucking oh god, what's the Zodiac killer style Riddler story that I was not ready for, but actually was. I mean, I don't know, it was a weird take that I wasn't expecting, but actually did come out of one version of the comic, so it made sense. It just, wow. It's basically just him leaving fucking random ass clues and doing all the normal shit, but he's like hacking off body parts and the like. But what was his actual motivation? Because that's the interesting thing here for us to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I liked the most about this particular iteration of Batman is all of the similarities between the Riddler's character and Bruce Wayne's character, right? Where they're both orphans, they both have a, complicated relationship with their legacy and with Gotham City and with all of these things. I get the impression it was intended to show, two ways this could have turned out and show, something about Batman's character. But I have to say, I kind of had a moment like I had when I saw Black Panther, and for a long time it's like, I'm not sure if Killmonger did anything wrong, and like with this one, definite spoiler here, the Riddler is doing all of these things that maybe not the best way to do them, maybe not the, most peaceful way to go about it, but going after the right people, trying to expose real corruption, really seeming to kind of, be the most sympathetic character in a lot of ways. And then at the end, they, have to have him do some sort of big mass shooting to be like, no, he's really the bad guy though.
Yeah, but, that's the thing is, did he... Well, yeah, no, it was implied that he intended it to go exactly how it pretty much went up until Batman spoiled it. But, I mean, he wasn't directly there shooting people. So, his motivation, as I hinted at, was, and as Alex just hinted at, very politically motivated in this one. Bruce's dad... Surprisingly, they didn't really cover Wayne Industries in this one. They instead went into his dad's political career, or rather failed political career, and his promise at a renewal plan for the city. And it didn't pan out. Riddler saw that, Edward saw that as broken promises, as a pattern of broken promises from the people, but from our politicians and people in power, and decided to go on a murder spree to, fucking basically let them know they can't get away with that shit. And he had tried to inspire an uprising. And you see him online radicalizing others online, hosting his online show, which is not unlike a lot of radicals in online in various fringe movements, both right and left. But I mean, you definitely see it definitely felt a lot more modeled after like crackpot right wing style. Like it
was
very much
an incel board kind of thing.
Yeah, it felt like they were going for that white angry mass shooter vibe.
Like you get the sense that Riddler is more likely to be on what do you call it? That right wing conspiracy social media. Begins with a G.
Gab.
Gab, right. You get the sense he's more likely to be on Gab than to be on Mastodon,
Yeah.
And the way that he sort of motivates his following is not in any sort of uplifting or constructive or even coherent political ideology. It's more so that he's just lashing out in frustration. Understandable considering his background, but it's a frustration that, while understandable, does not ultimately lead to any sort of liberatory ends. It's just, you're killing people, but what does that do for the system? That's kind of why anarchists discarded the whole propaganda of the deed method like a century ago, because you're shooting heads, but it's like it's a hydra. Ultimately more heads are just going to pop right back out. It's not doing anything to actually confront the system itself, just figureheads within it.
Yeah, it definitely comes off way more just blind kind of rage that you see a lot in right-wing circles, where like they're pissed off. They know they're pissed off. They don't have a coherent answer as to how to fix it. And they just kind of want to lash out violently as the answer. And, it's not, but you're right. Like, it's not just a right-wing tendency, because it also mirrors a lot of the issues with propaganda, the deed, within anarchist circles and things like that. And he had no coherent ideology in that, except being upset that the government wasn't helping working class people, which, I mean, both people on the left and right claim to believe that in various ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think what made me uncomfortable about it is that while it was somewhat more right-coded, in a lot of ways, I do feel like part of that representation creates a kind of conflation between what's happening on the right and what's happening on the left. And this is not to say there aren't people doing and promoting things like that on the left. There absolutely are. But it felt kind of both sidesy to me, of like radical, always bad, always looks like this. And then also, there were a couple scenes in particular where I got the sense that the scenes were supposed to remind us of the summer of George Floyd protests and, this idea that people across the city hating the cops was itself inherently dangerous and something to be fixed, And I think my biggest problem was sort of at the end, you get Commissioner Gordon coming back and saying, oh, it turns out actually there's a whole bunch of cops who weren't corrupt. Surprise, hooray. And it just felt a little bit cheap as a way of dealing with it,
Yeah, I don't remember those protests. I remember there being sympathy for Riddler and his actions among the populace, but I don't remember the protests in particular. I will say is though, yeah, it was really funny that they kind of had to do the whole but there are some good cops kind of thing to balance out the fact that the entire institution was not only corrupt but also facilitating the whole crime system in Gotham.
Well, that was something that I thought was kind of good, right? Is having this whole look into, well, what's actually going on? Are these really, the people we think of as the good guys? Are they really the good guys? No, they're not. And that's been a repeated trope in Batman for a long time,
Yeah. It was very interesting that my roommate and I, after seeing it, we were talking that honestly, this is the first time in a while, the first time in a while that I've seen a piece of Batman media that felt more distinctly like liberal Batman than fascist Batman. I didn't get as fascist of vibes as I normally get from his character.
Yeah, they definitely weren't pulling from the Dark Knight Rises comic run.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
it was more so
definitely-
that. I mean, the fact that Batman is known to be a figure of vengeance, and in this film, it ends with him realizing vengeance is not enough, but it's never the solution, but rather, he needs to be pursuing hope, or being a figure of hope. That's a divergence from a lot of Batman media, and it's definitely more in line with liberal and left liberal kind of rhetoric.
And he's also, like I said, Wayne Industries isn't really talked about or touched on in this film. So it's very much, you don't see him as the businessman who can, who is profiting off of, you don't have that direct, like he's a businessman profiting off of weapons manufacturing and things like that, like you do in other media. I mean, it might be there in the background, but it's not discussed in this at all. Whereas, like in the Nolan trilogy, they tried to make that very explicit and go.
In the Nolan trilogy, he has a whole apparatus of surveillance.
Yeah, Nolan said he is George W. Bush in that, in many ways, and it's very different because in this, for one, he comes off much more just, emo rich orphan,
right?
than like anything. He doesn't come off as even trying to be the playboy socialite that we know that Bruce Wayne sometimes tries to be. Like, he doesn't have that corporate side to him in this. He seems like just the rich kid who's never thought about the fact that he can just go out and spend his money to help people.
Sounds like a TikTok.
He seems like a dude who just isolated after his parents died, but has money and is just like, okay, I'm gonna fight people now.
I feel like for me, Batman, there's always like two versions of Batman you can go with, and that's like Iron Man Batman or Punisher Batman. Like, there's Batman who's like super high tech and he's like, above the law and can like even go toe to toe with like superpowered beings. So like anywhere from like the Nolan verse to like Batfleck is like that. And then you have the kind of Batman that you see in, I haven't really seen in films very much because it's mostly been focused on that sort of tech-based Batman. But you have this sort of Batman that's like, the institutions are wrong. And although it can't go to that like full critique that like the cops are just like bad fundamentally, it is still for me like, that's what makes it less fascisty, is the fact that, which is ironic because he's more like Punisher in the fact that he's like not lording over people. He's not like surveilling people. He's not like doing, he doesn't have like a giant tank he drives to the streets. He just has a muscle car.
He also didn't destroy the entire city and have a huge body count in this film. Instead, he's sitting here actually trying to stop Riddler from destroying the entire city and fucking waiting, like actually going through the wreckage and pulling people out. Like, that's a lot different than what we see as the standard in superhero movies in general right now.
Yeah.
I will say I think I disagree a bit with Eric's take that there only like two routes could go with Batman. Either Punisher or Iron Man, because I think there's a third underexplored option, that being the McNovite-esque Batman that we see in Superman Red Son. That whole idea of Batman as a grassroots, I guess, insurrectionist kind of figure, particularly targeting the people in authority and, you know, the people within the state and within capital. Because, I mean, we do have this liberal Batman, and, you know, he does acknowledge that there's a lot of corruption in Gotham, but his entire focus, at least in the beginning of the film, has been, you know, striking fear in the hearts of, like, some random gang members, you know. It's like he's aware that people like Falcone and such exist, but in his time as the Batman, he hasn't really done anything to target them.
Yeah.
I actually totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that there is that third option of Batman being like, and you almost kind of see that at the end a little bit with like him like being on the streets and like pulling people out of the wreckage and stuff like that. And like I would love to see like a Batman.
I don't think they'll ever go that far with this franchise.
Yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
think I would love to see a Batman that is like like the Macknov Batman. Who is
To be
like, helping people.
To be honest, though, in a weird way, I want Batman to stay fascist. And hear me out. It's because my favorite Batman comics are the ones where he's going up against anarchy. And I think that anarchy as a comic character really only works if you have fascist Batman. And the whole point of that character was to show how inherently fascist Batman already was by having a young anarchist kid decide that he wants to replicate Batman, but do it with an anarchist moral code. And as soon as he starts doing that, Batman sees him as his enemy.
You ever see those the figurines that came out with the, I guess this is the Superman Red Sun stuff, Communist Superman, Anarchist Batman.
What?
Yeah. I had a friend who's a collector of Batman things, and one of the best things they had was these figurines where, you know, Superman straight up has a hammer and sickle instead of the axe, and then the Batman is, you know, all in black, and it's heavily implied that he represents anarchism.
Yeah, in the comic book, it's Superman's like, I offered them to live in heaven, but they fought for the right to live in hell. And that's Batman. Batman is like that character who's also like kind of like low key, actually kind of high key a terrorist because he like blows up buildings and stuff. And so in a lot of ways,
I think that's where the limitations are when it comes.
Yeah,
to,
exactly. I don't think Robert Pattinson's gonna be like, I will blow up this building if you don't contribute well.
Well, I didn't mean in that sense. I just mean like I think there's limitations to how much you can like reflect anarchist principles in a character like Batman. Because yes, you know, in the comics and not so much in the films, he has a Bat family, you know, a network of support, a sort of group that rallies around him and it's kind of centered around him. I don't think that is the best portrayal of, you know, anarchist ideas because it's really not centered on the individual. There was a run in the comics, I think a couple of years ago. I didn't read it, but I heard about it and I saw the advertising. And it was this whole We Are Robin kind of movement that was sweeping Gotham. I'm not sure about the ideology of that movement or whatever the case may be. I think it was just that Batman had died or something and they were kind of filling in. But I think that's more akin to what an anarchist sort of movement in this kind of superhero landscape would be like. It would be a group of people taking on, you know, this mantle, kind of like Black Bloc, except, you know, with a superhero moniker and, you know, acting collectively to, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Barbara Gordon is more or less implied to be Antifa in some of the comics, like joining Gotham's equivalent of, more or less.
Right.
I think if you did that, you would just end up with V for Vendetta. Like,
Yeah.
like I think you just wrote V for Vendetta.
Well, that's what we had in Anarchy, because Anarchy very much was a ripoff of V and his style and a lot of his aesthetics. And it's, I mean, he had the wide brim hat and the mask and the cloak and everything, just a different color scheme. And he very much had that same mix of philosophical anarchism and propaganda of the deed. You never see anarchist characters like that just organized, though. Like, I mean, yeah, he's friends with Legs, and he's and a few of the other like houseless folks, and help them out and shit. But that's really about it. And that's who he organizes with, and then other than that, he's doing things on a very individualist level. But then again, Alan Grant, who created that character, very much took him in a Randian direction later on, which was very weird for a character that started explicitly socialist.
I mean, to be fair, that character was basically just a reflection of Grant's personal beliefs. So once his personal beliefs shifted, he shifted the characters as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a flaw from the beginning that the character like Anarchy is not, grounded in any kind of broader circle. But that's the nature of the medium. You have these figures. You have Joker, and you have your Batman, and you have Superman, and you have your Lex and stuff. It's just these individuals, these great men almost, that have to kind of duke it out and determine the fate of the world in a lot of these plot lines. So
we have actually seen the more grassroots, like anarchist style Batman. That's just Green Arrow.
Yeah, but Green Arrow is also like a billionaire.
Well, so's Batman.
But Batman isn't really an anarchist. That's like the limitation of the character.
I mean, we weren't talking about billionaire Batman when we were talking about anarchist Batman. Anarchist Batman quote unquote anarchist Batman in Red Sun was just like some random guy.
Yeah,
I don't think he had any wealth.
His parents, he was an orphan because his parents were like killed in the gulags, I think.
We've seen the billionaire Batman try to be anarchist in the character of Green Arrow, basically, because that's Oliver Queen's whole struggle is he comes from wealth, but also has a very anti-capitalist politic that drives him. And he tries to reconcile that, and he does it in a way that ends up being somewhat odd. Most people wouldn't dress up as a vigilante and decide to be Robin Hood as their way to do it, but he does seem a lot more team focused from the in many ways. I'm very confused how Green Arrow is ever able to justify working with other heroes who work with the police when Green Arrow calls the police blue fascists and refuses to work with them himself.
You gotta meet people where they're at.
Yeah, that one's a very weird one, and that is something that I think the fact that we have a lot of non-anarchist writers and non-leftist writers in general, who really aren't writing his character from a consistent philosophical point of view, that's where you get those contradictions, because they're going to do team ups with other heroes, and they kind of discuss it. I really like the crossover. When we saw Green Arrow and Batman talking, when Frank Miller was writing that shit, it was great because Frank Miller is that right-wing asshole, so he's the perfect voice for Batman in that. And he's just sitting there having him insult Green Arrow just like right-wingers would and dismissing his philosophy. That felt more realistic than half the other writers who don't even really take his philosophy into account to even really, I don't know. It feels like his philosophy is not consistent and falls to the wayside a lot in his comics.
On the subject of Batman and this problem of kind of all superheroes trying to tackle these problems as an individual without organizing, that was one of the other really nice things about this movie was that we got Catwoman, you know, we got Selena in it, and we got him like starting to trust and work with someone who wasn't entirely on the same page or at all willing to listen to him and be his Robin, you know. And so that was kind of good to see. I've always been a fan of the Catwoman arcs, you know.
It's very weird that they still keep trying to, or they still won't portray her as a sex worker, like having a background as a sex worker in any of the live action media. But in this one, we got pretty explicit hints that her mom was a sex worker, and you know, or at least, you know, worked in the Iceberg Lounge, which I mean is also sometimes, I don't know, like it was implied that she kind of, I don't know, I got that vibe at least, that she worked as a sex worker in addition to being a waitress.
Yeah.
Or wasn't it just she worked as she worked as a stripper. They said that. That's right. She was a dancer.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, they flat out said she was yeah, that's right. I was trying to put it together. I love faulty memories.
Have we talked about the Riddler as like faux anarchist? Because he really is just like BTK serial killer meets Unabomber anarchist bomber. Like he is that sort of classic stereotype of I mean, he's a little bit like incel coded, but he's also like, he's like, the rich and powerful don't care about us, and we should commit violence against them. Like, very much, if we're talking about like anarchist politics in the Batman, he is what people are going to say, well, he's an anarchist.
Yeah, I mean,
we kind of touched on this earlier, but yes, he's populist in the sense of, you know, pushing back against the wealthy minority, but ultimately, not only is politics incoherent, but they're also not directed towards the system itself. They're more directed towards specific people that he believes, have wronged him or wronged people like him. And I think it's kind of dangerous to just say, oh well, you know, he opposes rich people, therefore, you know, he's he has, you know, anarchist, so he's anarchist adjacent or whatever, because I think there's a lot more crucial elements of anarchism than just anti-capitalism and anti-theism. I think one of the most important driving forces of anarchism is this desire to, you know, really unfold humanity's potential for, you know, mutual aid and free association, and those are not things that are, you know, represented in his character at all.
No, I completely agree. I'm saying that Riddler is what like a liberal's interpretation of what an anarchist would be, like a very unable to actually understand the structural critique that anarchists give, and is more just like the mad bomber, the classic, the cartoon of like the Eastern European guy with the bomb. Like, I don't think he's actually representing anything close to anarchist politics.
No, at best he's a Ted K wannabe, and he, you know, he misrepresents anarchism so heavily in the public eye that it skews the image of our politics to the public that badly.
But I don't think he's even associated with Ted K. I mean, Ted K wasn't even an anarchist, despite some people's, you know, constant, you know, memeing of him or whatever. I think he's pretty heavily coded as someone who is more akin to the what do you call that guy? The sort of supreme gentleman type, who feels so personally wrong that he wants to, you know, go up against those people and go on his own sort of personal crusade against those figures.
Yeah, but I think that's how leftists are often perceived in media, as being like people like the classic, like, you're a leftist who lives in your parents' basement, and you like are mad at society because you did not succeed in capitalism. Like, that's sort of that, like, it's if Tucker Carlson wrote an anarchist character.
I was actually thinking it's more like the way that Sargon of Akkad engages with stuff. Like it's like, oh, you're a feminist because I can't do Sargon's voice. There is a theory I've heard that he's a fake British guy, and I just want to put that out because I think that is incredibly funny.
Fascinating.
But it's like there's this personal level of just like, oh, the only reason you could oppose this is because you're not served by this thing. If you were more successful, then you feel indebted to it, or something like that. And yeah, it's like that permeates all ends of the spectrum. It's not a great way to be, I must say.
But Andrew, I think you're totally right that nothing close to what the Riddler's doing is actually anarchist in any sense of the term. I think you're completely.
Hello, this is David Lieberhart. And Jason the Cat. Please join Crew Day Maine and the Center for Stateless Society for Crew Day Crawl, a week-long anarchist book fair and Mardi Gras festival in St. Tammany County, Louisiana. There'll be live podcast, music, stand-up drag, so much. Visit our website, crewdaygra.wgf, for more information. Thank you. Have a great Mardi Gras.